eval process. And then we'll go through some different treatment styles and techniques and things to use. We'll do a few case studies in a larger group and then small group, and kind of go from there. So the first thing, yesterday when we were during lab, we talked during the evaluation, there was just one slide about evals on there. And subjectively, there was a list of a few things that you should try to remember to talk about with your patient. And there was one really big one on there that you may be kind of more unique than what you would do. I mean, you kind of should always ask about it, but maybe not as important as with this population. You guys remember what that was? What do you want to make sure you ask those patients about when you're talking to them? I know I heard you guys had a test yesterday, so I was like, this is all going to be new today.
Oh, if they have hallucinations?
No, but I did say that.
Medication?
No. Medications, winner. Yes, medications. So the medications are going to be an important thing to learn about with these patients, and they're not only what they're taking, but when they're taking it, because that can influence kind of how they perform or how they're doing with you during their examination. So on Thursday, you're going to have patients coming in to work with you, and where you can do some of these subjective and objective tests on. So those are some things you're going to want to learn about from them and figure out kind of what's going on that front. So remember, the one that most likely all of them are going to be on is that medication called Sinemet, which is levodopa carbidopa. That's your gold standard for medication for this population. The thing that a lot of them may talk about, some of your patients, is that they're having some off phases. Remember, they can have these on and off phases where those medications they take kind of somewhat on a schedule. Maybe take it around 11:30, about 30 minutes before lunch, because levodopa carbidopa competes for protein absorption. So they're seeing you. They took their medicine at 8, and it's around 10 o'clock or 10:30. They may start seeing a little bit of an off phase or something like that. So that can kind of depend on when you're seeing them. Clinically, when you are scheduling them to come in and work with you, you want them when they're at their optimal phasing, essentially. So you want to try to get them in clinic where they're going to perform the best, because you're going to get the most out of all the stuff you're working with that they can actually participate in as well. So that may help you with some scheduling down the road. So with regards to mobility, you want to discuss with them where they're having some challenges with mobility, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. If they have a 2-story house, are they having trouble going up and down the stairs? Are they having trouble getting in and out of the bed? Are they having trouble getting in and out of their car? So these are all things that when you're talking with your patients, you're really trying to get kind of a vibe for them. You're trying to understand where they're having some challenges, because that ultimately is going to help you when you start to look at functional tasks. That's going to make your life a lot easier with trying to develop some things where you're going to work on with them. Because they just handed you on a platter, hey, I can't get out of my car. And then you get to take that, okay, how can I break down getting in and out of a car? What do they need to be able to do? And then I can work on those things in clinic with them, okay? Activity level is big too. So learning from them, if they're already doing some exercises, is going to give you a little bit of insight on that whole motivation. So remember, with this population, motivation can be challenging for them. So that will give you some idea of, they're already, doing a boxing class at Pinnacle Fitness 3 times a week. They're into it. They're ready to work. Like, this is going to be a breeze. Or they're going to say, I don't really do anything. Okay, and that might set you up a little bit to know you got more challenge ahead of you. You might have to motivate a little bit more. So discussing where that activity level is with them for sure. Support is good too, meaning like if they have caregiver support, if they have somebody at home that can kind of help you motivate them at home as well. Often, sometimes those caregivers will come with them to their appointments, but sometimes they'll come and they'll hang out in the lobby as you go. Okay, so kind of getting an understanding of where that is too. And you're going to find caregivers, unfortunately, that are really burnt out, and that can be a little bit of an extra challenge for you. That is just another thing on your plate as a therapist, kind of being a part of that little bit of a drama sometimes can happen, and trying to look for maybe caregiver support groups for them, refer them to some support groups if they seem like they need it, because you'll have some of that. Subjectively, I think that's probably the biggies, aside from your normal stuff you're going to talk about with them. So objective-wise, though, this is where you're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what you want to really look at. Now, yesterday when we had that slide up about evaluations, there was a lot of stuff on there, and I said, you don't have to worry about doing all of this. I think as a student, when I first, God, how did I get through everything? I'm never going to be able to do it all. That's fine. You're going to be in charge when you're practicing, so you can do what you need to do, and then the next time you see them, guess what? You can do the rest. That's okay. That's fine. Okay? So when you first start talking to them and getting some of those subjective things, that's going to kind of guide you to where you want to go. You know, when they tell you their goals are to have less falls or that they're having problems with balance, well then maybe what should you do objectively? Measure balance, right? Right? Yeah. So maybe you don't need to do a 6-minute walk test right then because they're not talking about that. So you can kind of guide your evaluation based on what you hear objectively. So this is going to be kind of a review of everything, so then you feel comfortable with everything, and then you can kind of start pulling out what you want to do. Okay. So rigidity. Let's talk about rigidity. So what were the 2 types of rigidity that we mentioned yesterday? Anybody remember? Yeah, left pipe and cogwheel. Now, big question. So we're going to show you. You tell me which one this is. Which one? It's going to be a surprise for me too. Can you guys see? I'm sorry. This is not good body mechanics. What's that one? Yeah, good. And then here, cogwheel, right? Now
you really feel it like give almost.
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah, it's easier to break.
Yeah.
So what is rigidity velocity dependent? No, so it's not like tone. So it's a little bit different in that sense. And I believe in some of the slides yesterday when we talked about rigidity, we said, you know, it can be a lot of times in some of the flexors and all those things. But I do find a lot of rigidity often in the scapular area on a lot of patients too. And so they're going to be the people that come in and they have that really protracted shoulder and then they go to raise their arms here. So this is where we change hats, right? You put your ortho hat on and they say, oh, I can't do that, it hurts. What's maybe going on? You guys are right, Susanna. I told the last class, I just had a birthday. I'm older, I can't hear.
Oh, impingement.
Oh, I heard you. There you go. Yeah, so impingement. So you got to address that, right? Because if we're gonna be talking about how, like with these patients, right, trying to increase their bigness of their world. Right now, when it comes to with Parkinson's, their worlds are very small. You know, so when they raise their hand, so go ahead and just raise your hand, guys, as much as you can, raise it up. You guys are all huge, really, really big. Well, your Parkinson's patients might just go here, okay? This feels like it's just as big as what you guys did. Because that bradykinesia is that small amplitude of movement. So this feels normal to them. If they were to put your hand all the way up for me, if they were to do that, this is going to feel really, really weird. They're going to say, this doesn't feel right. This feels abnormal to me. This feels normal. So their world has gotten small, and our goal is to make it bigger, right? To increase the amplitude of movement. So so if we're trying to make them get bigger, and they have an ouch, we can't necessarily ignore that. And so that's why I was kind of saying yesterday, you're going to get these in every facet of your career, the patients that have Parkinson's, and you're going to have to address orthopedic issues, even if you're in a neuro clinic and vice versa. So you can't forget all those things. So we'll address the shoulder plane, you know, maybe mobilize the scapula, mobilize the glenohumeral joint, see if we can get some more motion out of them to get our big amplitude movements, which is what our goal is, okay? So that kind of leads into bradykinesia, which again, remember bradykinesia is one of those most common symptoms with Parkinson's that's associated with the dopamine loss. So that's going to be present in almost anyone, and that's that small amplitude movement. They're not necessarily weak, they just don't have big force, okay? So they just can't get it, you know, get that big movement going. Now, balance, there's a lot of different things that you can test for balance. What's some examples that we talked about yesterday that might be a good test to do for this population? Tug, right? That was one. What else could you do? Yeah, mini bass. Those are all got really good balance tests in them. What about for gait? Yeah, the DJI. That's like so popular here. You guys do that one all the time. Yeah. It's like the best answer for everyone. So, but there's some other examples. You can look at their speed, their velocity of their gait, cadence, all those kind of things. Now, with regards just to to a patient's gait that has Parkinson's, right? What are some kind of signs that, we kind of had a slide yesterday that had all these things about their gait. Can you guys remember any of them? Shout them out. Fascinating, shuffling.
Forward.
Yeah.
Small base, small.
Yeah, narrow base. What about their arms? Did somebody say that? Decreased arm swing. What about their head? Yeah, forward head, forward trunk. Yeah, trouble initiating. Knees are bent, ankles are flexed. Okay, so their gait is sometimes like this. Okay, so when you're testing for, doing your DGI, that does pick up on some stuff, but you may have, have to look objectively to just look at them and see how they're moving. And you just write that down. You can look at that then down the road. The mini best test, which someone mentioned, is a great one that looks at, your reactionary responses, your all those kind of anticipatory responses too, so you can kind of wean some of that out. I like that test because it looks at those things. And I didn't mention this to the other class, but sometimes, you'll have, we talked yesterday on that Ho and Yar scale, right? That was that scale that we looked at that kind of graded people. And we said, right around stage 3 is when people start to get postural instability. And that's usually, unfortunately, when they enter the healthcare system often, because that's when they're maybe having a little balance issue or some falls, and so then their spouse says, hey, maybe you should go to the doctor. They go to the doctor, boom, 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 boom. Ultimately, they'll end up in clinic. But where we are most effective is when? Before that or after that? Well, before. So if someone's at stage 1, they may have just unilateral symptoms, right? They're walking and they're maybe just not swinging one of their arms. So it's not so bad, right? They haven't fallen, they don't feel unsteady, they're doing everything kind of normal, but they're starting to see some early symptoms. Sometimes when you have people in clinic and you just do your standard objective test, nothing comes up. So you're talking about trying to motivate someone to come to clinic and work with you when they don't seem like they have that much wrong with them. And you might get that. They might say, I'm not sure I am here because I don't have any problems yet. The mini best and some of these other tests really start to pull out some of those things. You put them on that incline board and tell them to close their eyes and they fall backwards immediately and they go, oh my God, I didn't realize I was having trouble with that. Or you put them on foam and things like, or they can't come up on their tippy toes independently. So that really helps you take some of those things you found there and then talk to them about it. It kind of opens the door to say, yeah, you're in the right place. This is where you should be right now. So we're going to work on some of these things. With regards to range of motion, where do you think you could maybe give a home program, based on range of motion, based on how they're standing? Think about, visualize some of those pictures we saw yesterday and some of the videos. Where might they be tight? Hip flexors, is that what you said? You just said flexors?
Yeah, flexion in general.
Yeah, flexion. So give me some more particular examples. Hip flexor.
Anterior chest, like pec minor.
Pecs, yeah. What else? Hammies. What else? What's up with her neck? I don't know your name, but you do a good bad neck story. Every time I've said neck, he goes, I'm cued. So look at his neck. What's wrong with it? What would we need to address on him?
Tight anterior structure.
Yeah, right? What would we want to strengthen? Yeah. What else would you want to strengthen? Just overall, whole body wise. Yeah, scap saves.
Glutes.
What'd you say?
Glutes.
Oh, glutes.
Spinally sensitive.
Yeah. Postural muscles, really, right? Anything? What about calves? Yeah. What about their quads? Why not?
Alright, walk around with bent knees.
Does that mean they don't need to be strong? No. They need to be strong because if they catch the toe, guess what muscle they gotta kick out to catch themselves? Their quad. So don't get too hung up on only extensors. Okay, so you'll do some strength testing maybe during your exam, and you might find they need a little bit of that. And it may be that they can't even get to terminal knee extension, right? So, kind of think that big picture-wise. But yeah, the biggies are going to be a lot of those postural muscles that make them stand up a little bit better. Okay, good. Based on what we talked about yesterday, what are some ideas of some functional tests that you guys know that you could do some tests for objective stuff. Remember any of them?
You said 5 times at the stand.
Yeah, 5 times sit to stand. That's one that I just do a lot, and that's based on PD Edge. It's a research group that looked at like all the tests and which ones were best for Parkinson's, and that was one of them. But there's another sit to stand one. You guys remember? It's a 30-second sit to stand. You guys know that one?
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that one as well. Any other functional things you could do?
Tug and dual test tug.
Yeah. What if they tell you they are having trouble rolling in bed? What could you do? Huh? Yeah, simple, right? So don't overthink it. So if they're having trouble moving in bed, then you need to put them on the mat and have them move in bed and see how they're doing it, and just document some things you're seeing. Okay, so you know that, and then maybe that will help you then say, okay, this is where I need to gear some treatment so we can focus on that functional task. Okay, so there's listed a ton of different functional tests. Again, 6-minute walk test is there for aerobic, and that would be, if somebody's if they express that they aren't doing as much walking as they used to do, then maybe you want to do that just to kind of get a baseline to where you're at, so you have something to write a goal for, and then objectively you can go back and look at it later. I have a patient right now who has Parkinson's disease, but he also has severe spinal stenosis with claudication, neurogenic claudication, so he's limited with walking. So that would be an example of where the 6-minute walk test I could do with him to see orthopedically and with Parkinson's if we can get him doing any better. Okay, so it's kind of individual to any patient. So that's why that subjective kind of chat you have with them at the beginning is so important. Okay. Any questions just on objective stuff?
With the mobility, I'm sure you talked about how getting caught in the blankets is a big problem. So when you look at that, do you put a blanket
You
on?
could. You bet. Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't do that. Especially if they just lay down and the bed pop right up. And you're like, okay, that's not what I thought was going to happen. So yeah, maybe you'd grab a blanket and throw it down. A lot of times for them, my advice to them is like silk sheets, no flannel, anything like that. Something that they can move easily in, because they just kind of get wound up in them is usually what happens. But that's definitely one that's pretty common, for sure. Or getting all the way up to edge of bed. Getting that power to move all the way up. That's a good question. Okay, well let's talk a little bit about movement strategies. So some things to think about with the basal ganglia, and kind of our focus. So when it comes to us treating, what we want to do is treat with those intentions or attention to what we're trying to do. So when we bring attention to a task, what that does is that bypasses the basal ganglia, and then that taps into other parts of your brain that can make that task happen. That's essentially like neuroplasticity in a nutshell, okay? Tapping into other areas to get that function. So there's a lot of different techniques that we can do with regards to Parkinson's to kind of, I guess, push that along, so to speak. So movements there's just some movements listed here that are difficult. Ambulation we talked about already. They have that festination of gait, that slow kind of get up and go motion, lack of arm swing. Turning is a challenge, so it's not that they can't turn. So when I turn around, I walk and I just turn around, okay? But with Parkinson's, they may come, and then when they turn, it slows down a little bit. It's either more steps, or they kind of start to get froze, and then they gotta go, okay? So turning can happen, but it's more challenging, or it's definitely much slower, okay? Sit to stand is something that, in my opinion, almost every Parkinson's patient has some challenges with. So I work on sit to stand with every patient I have with Parkinson's. It's a really functional activity. They need it to go out for dinner with their friends. They need it to go to the bathroom in a house that they've maybe never gone to the bathroom in before. They have to be prepared to be able to do that. And it's a nice way of, admittedly, it's something you can teach, like that you can get them out in the lobby and they can barely get up, and when they leave they can get up. So it's something that can get really good, quick success with, which again helps with that motivation, which can be challenging for these guys. So if they're successful, then they see that and they say, oh man, now I can get up, I know how to do it, okay? Transfers that would really depend on what they're kind of looking for, what they're having trouble with. The one I get asked for a lot is being able to get up from the floor if they fall. So often we will practice getting up from the floor and then breaking that process down and practicing those steps and then putting them all together, okay? And then again, bed mobility, which we already talked about. Now, the one thing with, just with this population that's a little bit different than what you guys learn in ortho. You know, in orthopedics, we learn when we have our ortho patients, they kind of make mistakes, right? And then you kind of cue them a little, and then they figure it out, and then stuff like that. That's a lot different, though, with Parkinson's. With Parkinson's, we need to cue them consistently to make the task be exactly right, okay? So it's not like, you know, if they're going and they're stepping, and you say step to, you know, the left, and they do this, you say, no, I don't step like I do, just like me, bigger, okay? So we correct that task until we get it the way we want it to look. And if we don't want to reinforce those bad habits, they need those cues from us to help get that task to look the way that we need it to look, okay? Now, sensory cues, we have some listed. So when I was telling you guys, like, my first patient was that one that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this person. Like, I need to look up something. And I found an article, and the article I read was about using the term long steps or big steps to help with walking. So this person came in the first day, we did the Eval. On the way out, I said, well, I'm just going to throw this out here and see what happens. And sure enough, it worked, right? All of a sudden, he walked out, and I looked like a rock star. You know, I was like, whoa, look at that, okay? So what we were doing when we did that is we were using an auditory cue to cue him to take bigger steps. We tapped into that auditory cue and an external cue, which he then could utilize to make those big steps happen, okay? So using a word, you know, long steps, big steps. Somebody in the last class was more military based, and he was like, we used or something weird like that. Whatever. It could be a song, it could be a phrase, it could be whatever. It's just a cue that's getting them moving. And so we tend to use big a lot, just by habit. And then over time, then I find the patients tend to use that too. But if you're finding that's just not jiving with them, then you change it up. You come up with a different cue that maybe they like more, they can remember, okay? Now, when it comes to, like, sit to stand, okay, so everybody just stand up. Okay. Aside from just having to drag yourselves up, you didn't have to think about it too much, right? You just got up, pretty easy, right? You just did it naturally, internally ingrained. So go ahead and sit back down. Now, when you're with Parkinson's, that natural movement just to stand up isn't there. So what we have to do is think about the steps that maybe you have to do to stand. So what's the first thing you got to do to stand up? So you try leaning forward from where your butt is right now and standing up from it. It's harder to do. Yeah, what do you got to do first? Scoot forward. So scoot forward. Some of you probably just naturally did it. Okay, so your butt's all the way to the front. What's the next step you do? Your butt's at the front. Yeah. So simplify it. Lean. Okay, so everybody lean. What's the next thing you do?
Shift.
We already did that. We leaned.
Well, but like,
You have to like
okay,
shift
okay.
onto your feet.
Okay.
So like,
or stand.
or just stand.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much we were bringing it.
Well, just try it. So everybody lean. All right. Now what? Or stand. Or up. Or go. Right? You just broke it down into 3 cues. Okay. So go ahead and sit back down. So if you're working with a patient and they can't just stand up like you guys did the first time, we'll say, okay, let's use these 3 cues. Okay. Scoot. Everybody scoot. Lean. And up. Okay. So you just did an auditory cue to make that task happen. So that's just using that external cue to go. Now, it doesn't have to be the words. It could be 1, 2, 3, red, blue, green. Again, whatever you want. You're just using a cue to make that action happen and bring attention to that movement. Okay? Now, music is a nice tool as well as metronomes. Most people, if they have smartphones nowadays, you can have a metronome app on there. That's just a free app. I have one on my phone. So they can use that for a beat. That can cue them. That's just an auditory cue they're hearing. Okay. Music is great as well. Now, we maybe can't like have Kanye West come out and start rapping because we got to think of our patient population, right? So we might have to look at more appropriate music for them. A great question from the last session was, well, can that music eventually just not work? And I was like, well, think about it, right? When you're studying, you put music on, you maybe are humming along at first, and then you're really studying, and you don't even realize there's music, right? So that would not work for us because, again, we're not paying attention anymore. So we'd have to have music that we can pay attention to use the beat, okay? The cool thing with music, and I would say personally, my first exposure with music was when, well before PT school. I worked for a nonprofit for a while, and there was a man that I was helping out. His name was Bob. He had a little bit progressed Parkinson's. He didn't do hardly anything during this class. And they had a music session every class, like for 20 minutes or something. They would start playing music, like old-timey music. He would get up and dance me all over the floor because he had the beat, right? So he would go from not even being able to move to dance. And it's pretty amazing, but what was he doing? He was taking an auditory cue and he was listening to it and moving to it. So music can really work in your favor quite a bit. It's a nice thing to integrate into classes, like if you do like an exercise class or something for people. But again, you have to make sure the attention is still there and that they're still going to be listening to it. You can just use one single word. Now we don't want to get too crazy with our wording. Be like, okay, now you're going to scoot your bottom forward, and then you got to lean forward, put your nose over toes. Okay, now shift your weight forward, and now put your feet here. Now stand up. They're going to go, what the heck are you saying to me? You can just use a single word, stand, right? So maybe the first couple sessions you're working with them, you're breaking down all these steps. You're doing the scoot, the lean, the up. They come back, they're able to do it. Now you change it maybe down to just one cue, stand. It's still a cue, but they know the steps now. So you're progressing that a little bit, okay? Or you can do the multiple steps and use that if they're not getting anywhere with a single cue. Now, we also can use visual cues. Some of the most recent literature, auditory, are kind of, I think, seem to be more effective. But I would say for me, I tend to use visual cues because there's visual cues all over. They're around us. They're free for the taking. Like just in this room itself, if I was trying to get somebody to just walk from me down to Karen, there's tons of things right here that I could use. I could look down, I see the cracks. I could step over cracks. That's a cue, visual cue. I could see the big orange ball, and I'd say, okay, see that big ball, walk to that ball. Okay. So there's a lot more cues around us that we can use, I think visually. We can use dots. We have, dots back there, cones back there, anything you can throw on the ground. They can all be used as a visual cue, and they use that. They can use my own foot and say, step to my foot, or step over my foot. Okay, so kind of trying to get some steps to go. They talk here a little bit in your lab. There's some research that talk about putting painter's tape down. I don't necessarily, I've not told people to do it this particularly, but sometimes I'll have them put pieces of electrical tape, like bright electrical tape, like on their basement steps where maybe it's more dimly lit, and they can see that and then step up or over it a little bit. So if they're having trouble or fear of falling on the steps, that cues them, and it's a nice thing that doesn't look too bad, and they can use that to help themselves get up and down stairs a little bit safer at home. It also talks about the virtual reality, but like I said yesterday, I haven't seen that personally. But as the population ages that we have now, people that are in their 50s now are a little bit more savvy, so they might now be a little bit more able to do like virtual reality and get more into that. Plus, you're seeing a lot of that now, just easier, more accessible. So by the time you guys are out and practicing, you might find that you see that around. Now, with regards for targets for gait. So let's just talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about targets, there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize targets. They're all over also. So like when I just said, I see that big ball back there. I walk to that. That's my target, okay? Trying to walk through a door. Sometimes doors or thresholds or changes like that from going to like, linoleum to carpet, just that little change of environment can throw them off and cause somebody to freeze or get stuck, that akinesia. And so implementing some of those visual targets are helpful. So I know the door is going to make me freeze, So I'm gonna look past the door, and maybe there's a poster out there on the wall, I don't know. But maybe there's something out there. I'll say, oh, I'm gonna walk to that poster. That's my target. So someone, we say, I said, pretend, you know, you have a patient. He's a professor here on campus. He's got a meeting at Union South right at 11:30 when everyone gets out. And it's crazy crowded at the crosswalk. He's got to get across the street, and he gets a little bit anxious, and that increases his freezing. Okay. What could we do? What could we tell him to try based on what we just talked about?
Concentrate on what target to go to. So.
Yeah, so maybe there's a subway across the street, I don't know, but there's a sign. Walk to the sign. What else? What's on the crosswalks? Lines. Yeah, step over the lines, okay? If his anxiety even gets higher because there's all you guys walking at him, you know, we have to maybe talk about some deep breathing, trying to just take a couple deep breaths. When the anxiety gets higher, that's going to usually increase freezing for these patients. So we want to try to help them learn like some deep breathing, some ways of bringing that anxiety level. So talking about different ways they can do things out and about in the community. Devices wise, again, we talked about U-steps and canes. The laser, again, can be kind of expensive, not covered by Medicare. But I have just done like a TheraBand, piece of band, or even a string across a regular walker, and they walk to that. Now it's not low, so they're not going to trip over it. It's higher up, so maybe they're just bringing their knee to it as they walk. And that can be a nice, like, you know, friendly, price-wise thing that you can show them that they can try to utilize too. Or even some of your free clinics or something, if you have somebody that comes in, that's a real easy thing you could add for them. Now, we talked a little bit about freezing yesterday, or that akinesia. I would say clinically, well, as a clinician, freezing is really hard to treat. It's not as, out of all the symptoms, it's a little tougher to, I guess, fix, so to speak. Part is because the anxiety plays a lot into it. But there are some techniques that they have found works. And so probably one of the better ones is if somebody's walking and then they get stuck. That's kind of what happens. And I've had a patient that would walk and he'd get stuck and he'd just kind of go forward. Like he just would not stop completely. He just kind of kept thinking, if I keep moving, my feet will come, and they just don't. I mean, to a point where he wore a hard hat 24/7 at home because he thought that would help him if he fell, and he was falling so often. So what we had to teach him, because his issue was freezing, right? He could get going, but he would have these sparks of getting stuck every once in a while, which really didn't know when they were coming on. We'd say, okay, stop, rock, step, okay? That rocking or rotational motion, when it comes to freeze, tends to break that freeze a little bit. And I think Karen mentioned at the end of our class last time, which I forgot to mention, is your eyes don't often get stuck. So you can start by just moving your eyes a little bit, and then maybe your head, and that may even help. So, because freezing doesn't only happen when they're standing, right? Freezing can happen when they're laying in bed in the morning. Because what's happened overnight? Yeah, their meds have worn out, so they're very, very, very stuck. They just can't get going. So we may try to start with just head movements, trying to get them moving. Maybe they can pull their legs up into a hook line position and start rocking a little bit, and that may help break that a little and get them up and going. Okay. But freezing can be challenging, but you just need to educate your patients about that and then practice it. Stop, rock, step. That's what I say. They give some other, they do sway, I think. So whatever words you want to use, you can use, but it's the same idea of going back and forth. So other techniques we can do is visualization. So visualization would be, so if I'm working on steps, so I go out for a walk and I have trouble turning in my hallway into the bathroom because it's carpet and then it's linoleum, and it takes me forever to get there. So we would teach those guys, visualize a clock on the ground. Okay, there's 12 o'clock, there's 3 o'clock. So when you're walking towards down the hallway, you need to turn to the bathroom, say step to 3, visualize that clock. Okay, or step to 9, visualize your clock. So you can utilize that, and that's something they can take with them. That's, don't need a suitcase to pack that in, right? They can just practice those techniques and utilize them wherever they're at. Another one that's often used is, they say puppet on a string in your lab manual. I don't have as much success with that kind of thought, I guess, visualization, and I don't know if it's because they're just having trouble visualizing a puppet on a string. But I do have some people that, I had a guy that he had a DBS, and he said, I'm just going to pretend I'm getting pulled by my doodads, he used to say. So he'd be like, they're pulling me through the door, you know, and that's kind of the same principle, like puppet on the string, somebody's pulling you forward or pulling your arms as you move. So you have to just kind of work with your patient and figure out what maybe works for them, what terminologies they want to use. But that worked really, really well for him. And then if he started to get stuck, I'd say, get their doodads, pull in or something, use their terminology so they kind of remember what that is and give that cue again, okay? Walk past the door, we already talked. So find that target, walk beyond it, okay? Sometimes in the like people in their bathrooms, because it's a smaller space, those movements then get even smaller. So even having like a poster up, you know, you could go out to work and print them out a piece of paper like this with the word big across it and stick it on the wall in their bathroom where they always get stuck. And they'll see that and they'll say, oh, okay, that's a cue for me, I gotta go bigger. So they get those bigger movements and steps. But a lot of times with regards to freezing, it's those combination of movements that stop rocking and stepping and utilizing whatever they need. That's definitely more of an education thing for your patients and practicing it all the time in clinic. So just making sure you can kind of tell them a little bit about that. Did I miss?
Can you talk about how you mimic the environment in the clinic to simulate where the patient's having difficulty with the freezing or issues? Like
shower?
Busy or
Oh,
small?
Yeah. So initially, let me just, okay, so we talked about using visual cues. So in clinic, so maybe our patient is like, I can't step very well, or I'm having trouble turning. So maybe we'll start out, can I borrow your chair? You have a stand up. All right. Wait, yeah. Okay, so maybe if my patient has some balance issues, I would start them with a chair so they feel a little bit more secure. And as we're going to work on stepping, I put some dots down and say, okay, step to the blue dot. And there they go. So they have a hand on here, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you all what, so I told the last class after they made a mistake when they practiced, so I'm going to tell you now, so don't make the mistake. So this is probably realistically what your patient's going to do when you say, okay, step to the dot. They might just do this. What is that? What's that called? When I said step to the dot, what am I doing? I'm not stepping there. That's a small amplitude of movement, right? Which is what? Bradykinesia, right? So what we need to do is say, no, get bigger. So they need to step to the dot. And if they still can't do it, then you would say, do like I do. Watch me. Do just like I do. Copy me. You're providing them a visual cue with your own body, modeling the behavior. That's why your exercise classes, that a lot of the people that are around Madison, there's a lot of exercise classes for Parkinson's coming up. And that's good for these guys because they're watching their classmates move, and that gives them cues. So we want that big amplitude of movement. This is not big enough. So we aren't going to just let them do this over and over again. We're going to say, no, bigger, like this. Okay, because we want to practice the quality of movement that we want them to be able to do. And so when you're in your ortho, you kind of say, oh, maybe a little bigger. Okay. You know, you're trying to let them figure it out. But with the Parkinson's population, we say, no, just like this. You show them what you want. Okay. Now, maybe they're nailing that. Okay. So we get rid of a little assistance, and now we do a bigger step, okay, and a bigger step. So once they kind of get that down, then we need to manipulate our environment a little bit. Now, when we look around this room, it's huge, right? It's a giant room. There's tons of space. It's well lit. If I'm trying to make that task harder, right, we want to kind of, over time, progress these little things that we're doing to make it harder so then it falls into kind of more real life. You know, they're performing for us here, but we want them to actually go out and do this stuff outside in their homes and such. What could we do right here to make things harder? What I just did. Any ideas? Yeah, we didn't get that one last. That would be a good one. Have them do it on a more uneven surface. Yeah? Somebody else say something?
Turn the lights off.
Yeah,
things in
make
the
it
way.
dimmer.
Put 'em in
Make
a
it
corner.
dimmer. Yeah, put them in a corner. What else? How many of you guys are in here? 20? What if you guys all stood around them?
You don't want 'em.
That'd be kind of crazy, right? But that'd be good practice. Yeah, that'd be good practice. So like in a gym, like if you're at work, you go to the area where everyone's hanging out, and that's where you do it. You know, and you have them practice when there's people all around and get that task going. So then you can take those tasks and put them into more of a real life situation. Because the life is not all dots on the ground, right? It's crossing the street on University Avenue at 11:30 when you guys are plowing into them. Okay, so things like that. So you got to think big picture. That's how the progression is when you're doing all these exercises with people. You can start simple, and you got to see what they can do, and then if they can't do it, then you keep practicing until you get it right, and then when they get it, you take it to the next level. So next level, after we just smoosh everybody together, we take the lights down. We're in a corner with 5 people around them, right, on an uneven surface. And then, what's going to lose out if we start talking? What?
Motor will lose out if you start dual tasking.
What?
Motor will
Yes!
lose out if you start dual tasking.
You're such a good speaker. Yes, so when we are starting to get more cognition involved, then it's frustrating, I'm telling you, because you just worked for the last 2 weeks on them doing this, and they're plowing in the thing. Here they are, they're moving their arms, they're just walking awesome. And then you're like, hey, so what did you do this weekend? Well, there it goes, okay? So you have to start practicing adding that cognition. And so I do a lot of that as they get better at walking. I start asking questions. Okay, go ahead, do some math. Let's do, 33 minus 3, go. Keep going. Tell me 5 things that are at the produce section in the supermarket. Tell me 5 states on the East Coast. Tell me 5 types of trees, 5 types of cheeses, whatever. And you start adding that, and then you still may have to provide some cues as they're doing it, right? Because that may diminish. You've got to cue them again. Okay. Did I get everything? Yeah? Anybody have any questions about that and kind of that progression into life? Yeah.
Do you feel like the visualization stuff like eventually wears off?
I don't use that very much. I use visual cues, but visualization, not as much.
But do you think it's because you see them later? Like
It-
if,
yeah.
if you were
Yeah.
able to see them early,
And
that
educate
might
them
work.
early on, it'd be different
Yeah.
probably. I just don't see as much success from that. Except for the doodad guy, his doodads. He visualized that, and that worked for him. And he was pretty progressed, but it's, you kind of have to fill it out. So, we're talking, I just like told you a bunch of stuff. I talked about auditory cues, visualization, visual cues, all big stomping to get some somatosensory going, things like that. Now, you can use any of those. You might find that you work really well, if you have Parkinson's, you work really well with auditory, but doesn't do squat for you, and you need some visual targets. And so every single patient you're going to get, it's not a cookie cutter. So you have to kind of figure out what works. So you may try something, and then eventually you got to say, okay, that is just not working. I got to change gears, come up with a new idea, and see what happens. And then you can give home programs based on some of that stuff you're working on in the clinic.
Yeah, and so with that being said, you don't want to give the same patient 6 different cues.
Right.
You want to hold some back, so you got something to go to. Because when
Yes.
that stops, that 1 or 2 maybe that you gave them stops working, then I got to bring other ones in, because then it becomes cognitive again. I can't
Right.
give them 6 different ways to do it. That's not going to work with this patient.
It's kind of the same thing with the music, right? You
Yeah.
stop paying attention. It's just more, it's like, yeah, you're telling me to scoop. I don't care anymore. I'm not going to listen. So you now maybe need a different cue. Maybe that's where you got to say, visualize this or use an auditory cue or something. Okay. All right. So we have a couple things for you guys to try with your kind of walking around and chatting with some of you. And just to kind of revisit from lecture that we haven't really specifically said is repetition, right? Repetition is key with this group. So when you're doing a task, so can I talk about y'all's thing? So when these guys, they had a great question there where we were talking about like, well, how do you know, what if they can't scoot or what if they can't reach or something? And then these guys, we kind of chatted about it too. So maybe their task is to get up from the chair and sit onto the bed. And so you may have to break that task down. You may just have to practice the stand over and over and over and over and over until they get it. And then you'll add, now, okay, now they're standing, now turn, now turn. And over and over and over until they get it. And then try to combine those tasks together until they get it. So repetition, 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 functional task, okay? So you can break those, and then if they can't do the sit to stand because they can't scoot, then you practice the scoot part, okay? Well, how do you cue scoot? Well, put your hand right by their butt and say, scoot your butt to my hand, all right? Or something along those lines. That's still a cue. That's a visual cue for them, okay? If they can't get that forward lean because they're a little bit wary about forward lean because it's scary, because it makes them feel like they're going to fall, put them in front of a table and put a target. They can just lean to a target over and over and over again so they can get comfortable with that process and how that feels, okay? So we're tapping into the other parts of the brain, so how it feels, how it sounds, how it looks, all that stuff is good, okay? Anybody have anything they wanted to ask or add to that we talked about maybe one-on-one that I missed? No? I think we covered it all. One question, just so I don't forget, I think the last couple things with the last class is like an exercise prescription. I think as therapists and as students too, we're always looking for like those black and white, right? We love that. And it's very gray in Parkinson's. And it's great because every patient you have is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's going to be different on the scale. Everyone's going to be different on what's challenging for them. So I don't have like an exercise prescription for them, per se, to the likings that you prefer. But what I can say is that if you want, for example, them to practice stepping, and you're going to give that to them for a home program, you're saying, okay, at your counter, you're going to just step, step to the right. And you're like, well, how many times should I tell them to do it? Well, what you need to do is you got to go in clinic, you got to practice it, and when that step starts to look like crap, that's the number of reps they're doing at home, right? Because we will not want to reinforce bad quality of movement. We want good quality every rep. So you're going to have to test the water a little bit and see, okay, well, when they get about 5, that's when I lose them. They start getting really small again. So maybe for a home program, you say, okay, I want you to do just 5 of these steps to the side. And I would always tell them to do it twice a day, and it's, yes, every day for the rest of their life. Plain and simple, okay? The day they come to therapy and work with you, that can count as one, so they just have to do it one more time. But that's kind of the prescription, essentially. So the prescription is going to be testing the task in clinic, looking at the best quality you can get, and then basing the number of reps you give off of that, okay? Hopefully that will help a little bit. Another common kind of question I had was, well, do you warm them up? So remember, what RPE does this group have to be at when they're working with you? 8. Yeah, 8. At least. So close. So close, off by 1. So when they come in, it's okay to get them warming up. So you can put them on an elliptical, or if they have an elliptical and they're safe to do it at home, yeah, tell them to get on an elliptical. Tell them to get on a bike or a new step. I prefer new step and elliptical because of the reciprocal motions that it has. But get them going on that, get them working, My patients that I have, they are sweating. The people that come to our exercise class are breathing heavy. And that's okay, So you're making them work, you're getting them amped up for that movement and their warm-up, because they're supposed to be moving when they're actually doing their workouts with you, okay? All right, so we're moving on to a little bit more treatment. Some of the stuff we kind of already talked about just when we were chatting earlier. So we talked about stretching and strengthening already. This just gives you a list of some things to keep in mind. These are great for home programs too. So like, for example, if maybe you've been working with a patient on the stepping and they're just not getting it with you feel like you can give them a home program because they're not getting it, they won't perform it at home on their own the way you need them to. So maybe you want to look at some of these things and say, okay, well, I'm going to teach you how to stretch your hamstring, you know, because you need that, or to show you how to do some scap retractions with a band, or things like that. So you can still put that ortho hat on and give them some of those exercises, because they need that too. So don't forget that you want to give them some exercises in that realm as well. Now, when it comes to the balance, you can, you know, put them kind of in a corner and have them work on some of that. I'm sure you guys have learned some of those, you know, for the safety reasons. So you can definitely assign balance things. You can do, like we showed you already, holding onto a chair or countertop and working on that, and then progressing over time by taking some of that away. And that's a nice way to, for them also to see that they're progressing as well. Oh, I don't have to hold on anymore. I got it. You know, I'm doing well. Okay. Probably for upper extremity things, the things that, so remember, micrographia is that smallness of movement. That's one of the symptoms that they can sometimes find. Actually, a lot of them have that. That's actually something that comes on, I think, a lot earlier than when, like, pre-diagnosis that they're just not aware of. So dexterity is tough, buttoning things like that. So I do a finger flick with them. And so all that is you're just going to make a fist, and you guys can do this if you want. You just make a fist and literally flick your fingers open nice and big. Make that fist, flick them all the way open. So it's a big, high amplitude, big motion, rapid motion. Now, when we are working with these guys, we also talked about that soft voice, right? Like that quiet voice is something that happens too. So just because we're not speech therapists, that doesn't mean that we can't address that soft voice, okay? So in all the exercises that we do in clinic and in class and for home, I tell them to use a loud voice. So we'll just add that voice to anything we're doing. So flick, 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 flick. They just added their voice, okay? So they're adding that layer on top. Or they'll count 1, 2, 3. And will I do that in a crowded clinic? Yes. They don't, you know, I do it with them. So I'm there with them supporting it. So A-okay, but you want to try to get that. And that is often something that's pretty important to them, is being heard. Because they're not as loud on the phone. They're not as loud when they're out for dinner at restaurants, things like that. And that's something that then you can kind of practice with them as well. The other thing is, remember we talked about akinesia can be that, or hypokinesia can be that flat affect. So just not very much expression in their face. So with their exercises, you can add expression to that too. So a lot of times, like if we're practicing some of the stuff we're going to do here shortly, I'll just tell them, okay, you got it. Now, show me a surprised face for do 5 sit-to stands, but have a surprised expression on your face the whole time. Or have an angry expression, you know, or be super happy. And they'll try to get the expression off into their face and get those muscles working a little bit too. Okay? And that's kind of fun for them. That definitely gets a little bit of giggles because it's just kind of goofy. Okay? But you'll forget to integrate some of those things as well when you're working. Okay, so we're gonna get up and move a little bit as a group. We're gonna go over some LSVT, big, and power. Power is what you see behind me. So just a quick review of LSVT. So LSVT stands for Lee Silverman Voice Training, and initiated with speech therapy. So it was LSVT loud, and that's why a speech therapist does that. And then they said, wow, this works. People are actually getting loud. So why can't it work with movement too? So they developed then a similar kind of idea of big amplitude movements, right? Getting bigger, working through full range of motion, high repetitions, into LSVT big. Now that's a certification class. So you can't, I'm gonna just show you a couple of the stretches so you can kind of get an idea of what it is. But if you wanted to go and utilize that with the patients, like on clinicals or stuff, you'd actually have to go and get a certification and take a little really easy quick test. I think you can even do it online nowadays. So if that's something that you're kind of like, you know, like I don't have enough to do, then go ahead and do that. But so I'm going to show you that today, but you do have to have a certification to be able to participate or show your patients that, just keep it in mind. But it is also prescription based because it's 4 times a week for 4 hours for 4 weeks straight, so 16 hours or 16 visits for an hour. So it's a lot. It's a pretty intense session of almost solid 60 minutes usually. And it's a big commitment for a patient. So, you know, for that motivation part, sometimes it's hard for them to kind of get on board to doing that. But it has shown some really good outcomes even 2 years out. So the research is kind of backing it up. So it's kind of cool to do. The other thing we're going to do then is called PWR, or POWER. That stands for Parkinson's Wellness Recovery. Essentially what they're doing there is also kind of working under the same principle. Using big movements, high amplitude movements to create a certain function. And so we'll go through a couple of them and talk about these guys back here. So let's go ahead and make a big circle with your non-rolly chairs. But what we're going to go through first is just 2 LSVT style of sustained stretches. Once you go through them, I think you'll realize why, oh yeah, I could see how this would be good for somebody with Parkinson's, because it kind of is moving and stretching and shaking all the things that I'm supposed to shake based on what Emily just taught me. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to start though, we're going to kind of switch to the first thing up on the board. It says power up, not LSVT, okay, but power up. So when I first get patients in Parkinson's, and after we've done the eval and educated a lot about different things, we start talking about certain terms. So we talk about that word big and what that means. And I use this word power up just because it kind of makes sense. Power up essentially means like what it sounds like. You're up, you're powered up. So in sitting, powered up is a nice wide stance. Your chest is lifted, your head is up, okay, and your hands ideally are back. So try not to pinch your fingers here. So palms are big and open, okay? Now, powered up in standing is the same, it's just this. When you're powered up in supine would be the same, you're just on your back like that, okay? So it's a nice cue though that once you teach your patients and then you're talking and all of a sudden they're like this, you can say power up and they'll go right back up, okay? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it's real easy to fall into that. A nice way of even exercising would be, you know, if you're getting somebody at the edge of their chair, and you got to think these guys have some weakness, right, in their scapular muscles, so this is a hard position to maintain, so they may fall. So in my exercise class, I'll say, okay, get to your edge of your chair, power up. I'm like, okay, now just do some long arc quads. Just try that. Stay powered up, stay at the edge of your chair, move your butt forward, cheating, okay, and feel that difference in challenge, okay, just by trying to maintain that nice tall posture. So you can utilize that power up position for a lot of different things, okay. All right, so we're going to jump now to LSVT, into one of the stretches. So we start them here, and you're just going to do like I do, okay. We're going to reach out big, down big, up big, and then back big. And we count loud to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And finish. Good. Out big. Down big. Touch the floor. Up big. Was he doing it right?
I was just trying to be conscientious.
I know you were. But he was like this, right? He was still doing it, but I was like, no, get back there. So that's what I was saying, like, look at that quality, right? We're being picky, but that's what we're looking for. So I think that's, again, you got to change your ortho hat and kind of over to this type of style of teaching, but we want good quality movement. Okay, so that was one of them. Now the other one, we're going to take our right hand and put our right hand up. Stay powered up. Good. So palm is up. So I say, oh, it's like you're carrying white wine on, or red wine on white carpet. All right, so you're going to scoop and push that palm up to the side as you push your leg all the way back. Okay, reach.
Feels majestic.
Get the arm up. He was kind of like, with his leg, so I took his leg and moved it.
Get in my room.
Okay, so it's not just here, it's even here, because the hip flexors you guys said were tight, right? So sometimes they can get here and then they're here, so I just literally push it back. Okay, so don't forget to, and you can take it and move that puppy back, okay, and say, try here. And then the next rep, just see where they can get, and if they need it again, you keep going and doing it until they get it right. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, so the next one on that list, oh, and just so you guys know, you have the website is on for this stuff right here. The link is on your PowerPoint that you got yesterday. So I added that on there. So keep it as a reference for you for down the road, because you can just click on it, and there's up at the top says supine prone, 4-point, all that. If you click on those, it actually shows you videos too. So you can watch them down the road if you're like, what did that mean? You can have that as a resource, okay? So Power Rock is really, I guess the idea of the Power Rock is for weight shifting. So when people are doing, with people with Parkinson's that are walking, a lot of times what I want you guys to look at on Thursday, I'm trying to think of who we got. Actually, all of them are pretty much like this, but this guy, Phil, who will be here, he does not move his pelvis. He's just like a solid, like there. You know, he wears his pants up to here, kind of, you know, he's just there. But he's one that would benefit from the rock technique we're going to show you, because he needs to learn how to feel how to rock his pelvis or rock that motion. So one of the techniques with Power Rock, there's different positions, but the one that we're going to try, we're going to be in that powered up position, okay? And we're going to rock by reaching one hand to the floor. I'm kind of going slow-mo here. One hand up, and notice when I do this, I really reach, the butt comes up, okay? And then we rock the other way. And then rock. So keep going and rock. There's going to be no light under here, but they are getting a little bit of movement, okay? So I'm going to hop up on the chair up here, right behind you. Okay. So you can also do this in supine, and it can be very similar here. Maybe they can get their legs like this, and it's just moving the pelvis back and forth, okay? So somebody who's maybe a little bit lower level, you maybe need to start there, or again, just the head a little bit, okay? The next one is power twist. This is looking more at trunk rotation. So where do we think you're going to notice trunk rotation lacking functionally? It's not up there. Where do you need to rotate in your trunk for it to look normal when you do this task? Walking. It was my red shirt guy again. I think it's right there. Yeah, so rocking. Trunk rotation is where your reciprocal motion of the arms. So the gait is going to be a big one. So this is a nice one if somebody's just not getting that rotation. This one's hard, so if you don't believe me, try it. But so we're going to try trunk rotation just laying on the back. And I like to do it with reciprocal motion because of obvious reasons for walking. So we would maybe go one way with our legs and the other leg with our arms, or other side with our arms. And I add anything you can whack, because we're looking for that power of the motion. So we go like that. Okay, because what you're probably going to hear, though, is something like that. But you're going to try to cue them to bring that forceful motion together. Okay? Now, you could do high fives with yourself, you know, high five me, or something like that, too, if you didn't have something like that. But this is a nice one to get some rotation and that rhythmical repetition. And you can see there's a picture on the far end. They do it in sitting. They're just twisting in the upper body, too. Okay? Keeping in mind any ortho issues, like if they have some back issues, you may not see that full range like I just showed you. They may just be really small motion. That's okay. Okay. The last one up there is power step. I would say personally, this is probably the one that I find I use the most. Mainly just because it's a nice thing for transitions. I don't know if you can see the one. It looks like I don't know what she's doing, but she's like on her leg here. Okay. But that would be one of the ones that I would do. I've told you that a lot of times for transfers, where they want to know about how to get up. So we'll go here, and the power step we do is this. You know, big power amplitude. So it's not this. We're looking for a nice power behind it. So that would be power step for that. But we also do a step. Okay, or forward, okay, or backward, Right, so backwards harder, but we need to do backward step too. So that stomping, what is that doing? Yeah. Yeah. What else do you think? When I say stomp, do you think you're going to take a bigger step to get the stomp? Yeah. So it's a nice cue. What often happens is this. What's your cue going to be?
The dragging sound. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. But is that right?
No, that's. I mean, that's.
So what are you going to tell them? If I do this.
You don't want to hear that.
Are you just going to tell me that? Or are you going to show me? Right? You're going to say no.
Yeah, everything.
Do like this. Everything you just said.
Yep.
So we got to say no, just like this. Pick up your foot. Okay. So if they keep doing that, anybody have another idea? I put a hurdle down, and then they touch the hurdle. So the hurdle then can provide. They have to step over. They can do it sideways too. It cues that big step. Okay? Any questions about the stuff we just kind of tried? So power up, rock, twist, and step you can do in all different positions. Okay? Do you want to show the power rock? Oh, stand. I didn't roll myself a note. Remember that? Yeah, so we did the power rock for side-to-side weight shifting, but then I mentioned earlier that sit-to-stand is one of those things that you can literally have a patient, grab them in the lobby, they can barely get up, and you will send them out of the clinic that day standing up better. And it's using power rock, okay, the weight shift. So we kind of already alluded to some of the steps. We got to scoot, we got to do this, and we got to stand. Well, power rock uses a little bit of that weight shift and some momentum too. And so we would do the same technique. We'd have them in a chair that's not moving and maybe along the wall or set up along the table. And we rock back. We come up and we reach forward. So you're unloading the butt. And we're not saying, okay, to stand every time, right? We're just practicing. So we're going to rock. And then we reach. So I call it like a rock and reach.